welcome everybody to a new episode of Dental Disruptors Podcast. I'm Jake Larsen. This is my co-host, Clint Berry. We're excited to be back at this today. It's been a little bit since we recorded an episode, but we've got some really exciting, disruptive news that we want to talk about today. Anything you want to say before we get started today?
No, just excited to be here.
Okay, let's do it. All right, so for those of you that follow the software world inside of dentistry, which we hope all of you do, may have heard some interesting news that Open Dental, which is probably the third largest practice management software out there, they have announced that they previously have been open source and have now announced they are going to become a closed source practice management software. Now, I will say before we get into this is a topic that is very near and dear to Clint's heart. He's very passionate about this. So he'll probably do most of the talking today. This probably stems from 13 years of integrating with Open Dental. So he knows it very, very well. But Clint, to start, why don't you give us just a quick explanation of the positioning in the market that Open Dental has filled, like how they've differentiated themselves, and kind of lay that foundation so that we can understand what that means.
Yeah, I mean, look, I have recommended Open Dental. If anyone asks, hey, what practice management system should I use? I would always end with, I would recommend Open Dental, assuming you had the right IT processes in place. But so I'm historically a pretty big fan.
I can attest to that because I've heard Clint make that recommendation probably 100 times on the phone. So.
And part of it is my bias. Look, I'm a developer by trade. And I'm an open source developer by trade, typically. Good. Big believer in open source and run a not-for-profit developer community built around open source. So I have my biases. And this news was not my favorite coming out of it. For the impact that it's going to have on dentists specifically, there's not a lot. To be honest, there's a small handful. They even say it in I'm looking at their license page right now where they talk about this. And they say there's this small handful of dentists or groups or software providers that were actually taking the source code and customizing it and compiling it and building their own custom version of Open Dental. That's pretty rare.
Yeah.
And I get it. I still feel bad for those people. They're not going to be getting updates anymore because it's closed source. So they're basically stuck with now this old version of Open Dental. The thing that won't change, that they're saying won't change, and I think is accurate, is if you're looking for read-only access to the data, it's still the best solution. It's free still. Even if you use their API, they built a web API for accessing the on-premise system. It's free, which is awesome. And so if you care about data portability, getting your data out, or you care about data warehousing, it's still a great solution. And you can still connect directly to the open source database, MariaDB, formerly MySQL, and get that data out. And so many tools out in the world are compatible with that database. And so it's a really good choice. They made that choice early on because it was free. Come to find out now as I read their post on moving to closed source, the only reason they were open source at all, apparently, was because they wanted to use MySQL and they wanted to embed it into their installer. And to do that, the license required that any software shipping with MySQL had to be open source.
Oh, wow.
And so it was kind of so you never were believers in open source from the beginning at all. It was just to get a free database, we're going to have to do this.
Interesting.
Kind of a bummer. I don't love it. I do appreciate the fact that they still have open data, and really this isn't going to directly affect any dental office that I can tell.
The users themselves.
Yes. The thing that's really going to, I think, hurt is the vendors that connect to it. because what's happened is they are the easiest to integrate with because they document their database structure, and hundreds, if not thousands, of vendors connect directly to the database and actually insert data in there. Yep. And they are scaring people away from that. And I think, this last post in January they had where they're like, hey, NextHealth has corrupted a database. This is going to keep happening because they're not using our official APIs. It's real. Like, it's a real concern. I'm not saying it's not a real concern. Mm-hmm. It is a real concern. I do think it's completely overblown on how much danger is there. Mm-hmm. Like, how many times has that happened with NextHealth? I bet you it's not very many. Yeah. Right. And we integrated directly with Weave for over a decade. We built and know that
thousands of connections.
I probably know that schema better. That database, Open Dental's database, better than almost anyone. Yeah. Except for maybe the person working on it every day, right? Yes. And we never corrupted a database at Weave. Yep. Like, you just be careful. But I also think there is a way they could have made writebacks still free and safe. There's a plethora of ways they could have done that. Yep. Add stored procedures for the main tables, like adding a patient, adding appointments, the things that a lot of AI companies want to do. Just add some stored procedures in there and let companies do it. Yeah. Put some validation on it. Let people do these inserts with stored procedures. But no, that's not the route they went. They closed the source, and now they charge you a monthly fee per location to write back to the database using their approved structures. And if you connect directly to the database, they're putting security methods in place to track that and flag it in the user experience saying, hey, someone's putting data into your thing. This is dangerous. They're going to corrupt your database.
And there's kind of a fear.
Yeah, the world is going to end. Yeah. Like, even though there's like thousands of people doing it all the time. Yeah. And I understand both points, but it's just ironic to me that it's called Open Dental. Yeah. And now it's closed down.
Now it's closed down.
They're following the same, like, they're basically Henry Schein with their developer program now for writebacks. Yeah. For reads, they're free. I love it. Keep it free. You guys are great. But for writebacks is a racket.
So there's a lot to, I told you guys, you get Clint going on this. There's a lot to unpack there. So real fast, I just want to rewind for those that aren't engineers that have been integrating with Open Dental and Dentrix Eaglesoft for years, just to create a little bit of contrast. So Open Dental is unique in the industry because they have allowed vendors or other people that want to access, read and write, to be available.
Yeah, allowed is maybe, I don't know if that's the right word. They used an open source database that was widely used and understood, and they documented their tables and like what the values meant.
But other softwares
don't do that at all.
They don't do that at all.
No documentation on tables.
Hence the name Open Dental. Yeah. Right. That's where it came from. And in my research, they started in 2003. And that was really a differentiator that got people excited about using them. And so this isn't it's not a unique thing in dentistry that these data sets become locked down. And that's what Dentrix, Eaglesoft, and others out there do. Open Dental was unique in the fact that they would, it was available. If allow is not the right word, they just documented it.
Yeah, it was just really well documented, and they made it accessible to people.
Yeah. And it's been like that for over 20 years. Yeah. What are they on version 24 or something like that? Yep. So like tons and tons of iterations. And now this change takes place under the basis of corrupting the database. And it sounds like that's kind of been what their explanation has been.
I mean, I have the explanation here. I think some of the points are a little bit weird, where it's like, oh, times have changed. Like they're like talking about like security. It's like, there's no clear argument that open source is less secure than proprietary software. I know there's a big argument, but I think in some cases, open source is more secure. I can go in there and make sure they're not doing funky things with the data. I can make sure I can see everything that they're doing from a logic standpoint. And so as a developer, like what they're doing. Yeah. So some of the arguments that they put in their license file, I'm kind of like, whatever.
Okay. So You talked a little bit about the impact that this should have. I think that it's important, when we talk about disruption, this is definitely the type of news that can cause disruption inside of the industry, whether it's for good or for bad. So for the users, the dental offices themselves, this should not be something they should be overly concerned about. It sounds like the greatest impact that they might experience is simply that vendors that they're using to do things may not be able to deliver on all of those things anymore.
It's going to get harder for sure. They're going to lock it down more. They're going to start getting warnings in the user interface, those type of things. So if you're using a vendor that uses NextHealth, they're going to start flagging it and saying, hey, don't use this.
So should people accept that? Like, is that fear valid that if those warnings pop up on the screen saying, hey, you're using a vendor that isn't one of our, and I'm doing air quotes here, approved vendors, right? Like, what level of concern should that?
I mean, it's a real concern. I don't want to downplay it and say this doesn't happen, because you hear about it. Like, you hear about some startup coming in and putting something funky in the database and making the user experience not usable. I think it's very rare that it's not recoverable, where it's it can't be fixed. I'm sure that's happened. Open Dental Support claims that that's happened a few times, where it's we can't fix this. They've messed up too bad.
But super
I think
small
that is very,
percentage.
very, very rare where it happens, where it can't be fixed.
So something to be aware of.
Yeah.
And maybe when you see it, dig in a little bit, but nothing to you have to go fire that vendor immediately because of that.
Yeah, I wouldn't, especially if you haven't been having problems. You're probably using a vendor that knows what they're doing.
Yeah.
I'd say the biggest impact from a startup and a disruptor scene is every startup in dental that was trying to make their way in the software world in dentistry. They start with Open Dental. Yeah. Why? Because it's most accessible, right? And you don't have to pay to do write-backs. You previously wouldn't have to pay to do write-backs. And so it allows a company to start, and all the whatever 16,000 locations that they have, or whatever number I've heard recently, it's a lot of locations that you now have access to kick off your startup. And now that's going away. So now there's no software out there that I can recommend for dentists that want to be able to access the cutting edge stuff, because the cutting edge stuff was always Open Dental first. Now it's gone.
Interesting.
So hopefully someone comes out with an awesome PMS that has a completely free API for reads and writes.
Yep.
And it doesn't exist yet. If there's any VCs listening, maybe we should just do it.
We go.
That's because it's it drives me crazy.
It's interesting though. When I was researching kind of the beginnings of Open Dental, it actually was called Free Dental at the very beginning.
Oh, interesting.
Did not know that.
I didn't know that either. Yeah. Huh.
Okay. So do you foresee any rippling effects, like anything else that will stem from this news, or is it not a big enough thing that's going to have any rippling effect?
No, I don't think there's going to be anything seismic other than, all these AI startups eventually are going to get flagged. And if they don't pay for API access, then they'll create these warnings inside the practice management system. It's going to hurt their business, I think, for sure. It's going to hurt NextHealth a little bit. I don't know how much. Sika a little bit, yeah. And
not Kala. Not going to hurt Kala.
Yeah. It'll hurt us a little bit too. Whereas we'll probably just have a bring your own partnership program where it's you can use the Open Dental API for your vendor if you'd like. You can use our API to do that. You just have to bring your own agreement.
Yeah,
which is great. But yeah, it hurts startups, I think, more than anything.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, Clint. So we've talked pretty thoroughly about this announcement from Open Dental. So if you don't mind, just give all the listeners just a quick summary and recap of what we've discussed today.
The TLDR, the too long didn't read version, which is it's not really going to affect dental offices that much. There's that small handful that were building it themselves, which I feel bad for them, but that's really a small use case. So offices themselves are not going to notice much in the way of operations unless they're using vendors that connect directly. Then they're going to start getting warnings, and then eventually it's going to start really blasting them to say, you got to stop using this vendor or else we're going to disable it, because they can. That's how I would summarize it. So nothing huge to start. Long term, I do think this affects the startup ecosystem the most. And now there's just you have to have money to play.
Specifically with the right backs.
Yeah, with the right backs. If you're a read only, if you only need read access, then Open Dental's still a great place to be.
So we will still let Open Dental call themselves Open Dental for that specific reason. They're still open for read.
Don't ask them to change their name.
Yeah, we're not going to push for
I wonder if they end up changing their name.
Just because of all the pushback.
No, I don't know if people push back. It's just maybe they'll just change their name because they're like, oh, we're closed source. No, we don't have to. Call it Open Dental. I don't know.
Be interesting. Well, one of the cool things we're going to do in our next episode is we're actually going to start to invite some of these up and coming new technologies to join us. And it will be interesting to ask some of these players how these types of things are impacting them. Like Clint said, the biggest area that this might disrupt or cause some wrinkles is in this startup ecosystem. So in our next episode, we're going to have one of our good friends and someone who is really disrupting the industry on with us with some really cool technology, and we can ask them what type of impacts they're feeling. So
awesome.
Take it from there. So thanks everybody for joining us today in our, what is this, fourth episode?
Yep.
Fourth episode. And we look forward to talking to you guys next time. Okay. All right.